It looks like we still have a few folks trickling in, so we'll get started in just about a minute here, but we're really, really excited that y'all are able to join us. We're not going to take up all of your day, but we do want to share with you a little bit about how to break into clinical research. What is clinical research? And really, why is this field growing so quickly and at such an incredible pace? I think a pace that really hasn't ever happened before in history. So we're really excited about that. Awesome. All right. Well, it looks like about time to get started. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Like I said, I'm joining you from Atlanta. I'm the National Program Director here at Clinical Research Fastrack. Our goal as an organization is to train and prepare clinical research professionals. It's such an exciting industry. I myself have been in research for several years. Before joining Fastrack, I was out at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona coordinating trials there in the Cancer Center. I've worked in a lot of different therapeutic areas. That's really the coordinator role at the site level is really my area of expertise. And we're joined today by CJ Anderson, president of a company called Finding Pharma. CJ, why don't you share with everyone a little bit about your background, yourself, and what exactly Finding Pharma is?
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for everyone joining the conversation today. So I actually started a company called Finding Pharma about 6 years ago, and we are a clinical research focused recruiting firm. So we work with clinical research companies all throughout the United States, but it really hit home for me just how many opportunities are in research when I had signed a client, I think within the first 6 months, called PPD, and they had 1,100 open positions in research. And that's when I really realized just how vast the opportunity was in this industry. So we've been growing the company since then, and we really are now focused on really helping as many of these organizations find motivated and talented research professionals. But the dilemma that we face right now, it's a pretty big problem, is that there's all these open positions across the US, but just not enough people to fill the positions. And so we're really at an interesting point now where we're trying to find more creative ways to find candidates that kind of have the foundation of knowledge or training that we can match up with these positions.
That's awesome. I know Finding Pharma is doing really great work out there. And CJ, we just actually pulled this number from Indeed.com the other day. We're curious to see how many open positions in the clinical research sector there are right now. And the results are actually pretty staggering. Over 77,000 open positions in the field. This has grown a lot in just the past few years that we've been tracking this. Every year it jumps up. Can you give any insights? Can you share what exactly is going on, why this number is growing?
Absolutely. So again, like I said earlier on, this is such an exciting time to be in research right now. So when I had started Finding Pharma, I believe there were 30,000 open positions. Now it's 70,000, which just shows you how significant that increase has been over the years. But what's happening is, more and more of these pharmaceutical companies are trying to get these drugs FDA approved. So for those that don't know too much about research, from the Advil that you have in your home or apartment, that had to go through a clinical trial. And so now there's thousands of potential medications that they're trying to get through and get FDA approved. But for that to happen, it has to go through clinical research. And so because of that, there's now, again, back to the problem is there's more and more drugs trying to get approved. But with that being said, that means there's going to be more clinical trials, which means there's going to be more clinical research coordinators needed. And so as year by year is kind of going, there's more and more positions opening up. And it really is kind of a significant problem now where there's not enough coordinators to actually conduct the trials to continue to collect that data and get more medications approved. So the problem is more and more companies have drugs that they're trying to go through trials, which means there needs to be more sites and more people.
That's awesome. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where we're learning so much more, which I think is resulting in a big jump in the industry. I know we have someone joining us from San Francisco, where I was mentioning that there's a lot of biotech companies there that are really pushing the envelope in clinical research, and all across the country, really all across the world. This is a global industry. The science is just getting better. We're understanding more about genetic therapies. We're understanding more about personalized medicine. We're understanding more about these disease processes. So we can really hone in on the best treatments to test. And last year, in fact, it was a record-setting year, record number of FDA approvals, actually. ever in history, which is really incredible. And I think it speaks to our advances in science. And so people are catching on, and this industry is just absolutely growing. So I'm just sort of curious. I want to take a second here and do a quick poll. I'd love to know, how many of you have tried to land a job in clinical research before? I'm just very curious. Excellent. Okay, about 50-50. Okay. Excellent. I'd love to know. Feel free to utilize that chat feature. For those of you who haven't, is this something maybe you're interested in pursuing? Is maybe that's why you're joining us here today, and we can chat more about that. Don't be shy about utilizing that chat feature. But it really is incredible, the growth in the field. And so, CJ, you kind of touched on this before, but I'd love for you to expand. You know, we have this demand, but where's the supply? Why do we have so few new hires, and how do we respond to that?
That is a great question. So unfortunately, there's kind of this huge dilemma where for those, I saw it about 50-50 have actually tried to apply for a research job. Oftentimes in the description, you see that it says may require experience. But the problem is there's all these open positions, but they need to fill them. But if you don't get experience, how can you apply for the roles? And so what's actually happened now over the last few years, they've replaced in the description with not just experience, but they're saying experience and or some type of training. And so the exciting part now about finding pharma's partnership with Fastrack is 5 years ago, where before they might have said you have to have 1 year experience or 3 years experience, they're now able to replace that with some type of foundational training to really meet that demand. So the dilemma is just there's all these open positions, but they say you need to have experience or you need to have education, but there really wasn't the right solution. And so over the last, call it 24 months with Fastrack, we've been able to give them the baseline training, but then also offer this amazing internship where they have 2 weeks of experience, hands-on experience working at a research site. So again, the problem is they need to have experience, but how do you get it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know something that Finding Pharma really stresses, and in our classroom, in the Fastrack classroom, we stress networking. I mean, this is such a big industry, right? Over 150, $160 billion industry. As we just talked about, it's growing like crazy. We're seeing all these jobs. Why is networking such a big deal? It's such a big industry. Isn't everyone just sort of anonymous in the field?
Yeah, so great question. In all the interviews that I've had, people that have actually fell into research, oftentimes they say, oh, I knew someone that was already in research, right? And they're able to get connected. And so as you're trying to get a career, it's kind of this secret gem of an industry where a lot of people are now wanting to get into it, but there's kind of a variety of barriers to entry. And so it's kind of like either you have to have the experience, the education, or know somebody, right? So the networking side is so critical because as you're trying to navigate the research world, making those relationships, getting to know people in the field is so beneficial because then those introductions turn into potential interviews, turn into potential jobs.
That's awesome. It's such a big, small world. And you touched a little bit on the training and the way we're overcoming the barriers to getting into the field. And I think, you really spoke to what it takes to get into the field. And a lot of that is about who you know and making those connections. And you spoke a little bit about the externship experience that we offer, where you're actually going into a clinical trial site and able to experience what running these trials is like firsthand. It's also a lot about the didactics. CJ had mentioned that in this field, there's kind of this catch-22. It's hard to get into the field because everyone requires experience, but you can't get experience without getting into the field. So CJ, we just talk a little bit about how that kind of practice before you play mentality can help one overcome those barriers?
Yeah, so kind of touching back on the internship, the part that I find really fascinating about that experience is not only do you have 2 weeks of actually working on a research site, but one of the most difficult aspects of landing a role is actually getting in front of the hiring manager and being able to sell your passion and your background. And all of these research sites, the nice part is it's almost like a 2-week-long interview. So you go through the intensive training and then you have the hands-on experience, but oftentimes you're right in front of the clinical research manager or the decision maker, and you really have 2 weeks to really learn from that person. But 2 things can happen. One, maybe that site is hiring and you end up turning that internship into a job, or maybe that site's not hiring, but they end up falling in love with your passion and what they believe you can bring to the table, and you end up getting a job out of that. And so I think the actual training is incredible. You're going to build relationships with the instructors, but then the actual internship as well. It's hands-on experience, seeing it firsthand, and then potentially landing a job shortly after.
Yeah, that, I think that's kind of the formula, right? That's the combination that allows you to overcome that barrier to really get into the field. And speaking as someone who's worked in the field myself, I know, you brought up passion. And I love this field because I knew I always wanted to be in medicine, but I didn't know quite where I fit into that equation. I didn't really want to go the medical school route. I was thinking, where could I fit? And when I stumbled on to clinical research, it really kind of changed my whole perception of the medical field. And really my passion has grown ever since, because in this field, you're working in the future of medicine, where you're testing new medications, devices, therapies, things that aren't yet FDA approved. I mean, you're truly working in the future. Our participants in these studies can't just go to their physician that they typically go to and be prescribed these new medications or devices, whatever it is, right? They only have access through these clinical trials, which I think is really incredible, and really where the need for training comes in. Because I think when you're giving something experimental to a human person, I mean, that can be really, really exciting. And it could be scary if you don't know what you're doing, but if you know what you're doing, then it can be really, really exciting. And CJ, I know you have a lot of passions in this field. Would you mind sharing with everyone kind of where you're coming from, your passion, what drives you to push this field forward?
Absolutely. So the interesting thing about research is oftentimes there's all these different individuals that maybe traditional forms of medications may not be effective, but they can receive hope through a clinical trial, right? And so for me personally, I've had a relative that has actually participated in a clinical trial that really added a significant difference to their life. And so as I've kind of gotten into research, I've seen more and more how much of an impact these trials can make on individuals, right? From oncology trials to Alzheimer's trials to diabetes. There's patients right now, to give you an example, I'm now heavily involved in the Alzheimer's research side. And we actually work with individuals that have anywhere from mild cognitive impairment to severe dementia, where if you're diagnosed with Alzheimer's, as of right now, there is really no hope. There are medications that can help with the symptoms, but there's nothing that I can actually go and stop the disease from progressing or potentially find a cure. And so those type of treatments and those cures are found in clinical research. And so every single day when I wake up and I'm involved in finding pharma or Alzheimer's research, we have the opportunity now to really make a difference and be part of the future medications, be part of future medicine. And so I always say kind of a slogan or something I say is, today's clinical trials are tomorrow's miracles. What I mean by that, again, it's where there's so many individuals now that they've been diagnosed with something, or maybe whether they have diabetes or some form of cancer, that a clinical trial can offer so much hope and potentially really impact their life.
I love it. And that's one of the reasons I love this field. We're always doing something new. This is definitely a field for people who like to grow and learn. And if you like to be bored at work, if you like to be bored at your job, this is definitely not the field for you. This is it's a dynamic field, and we're always pushing the envelope in it. So I'd love to open it up for some questions. I know we already had some questions come in, so I'd love to spend a few minutes and get to those. CJ, actually, this might be a great one for you. John here wants to know, is there a lot of room for upward growth in the field?
Great question. So I get this question all the time. And if you look at the healthcare industry, oftentimes people have a passion for wanting to be in patient care, but they don't know what to do. And so they work at a hospital, they work in healthcare, and I get asked all the time, they say, I've hit kind of the ceiling, what does it look like in terms of opportunity in research? And so the really exciting thing is that just from the most popular position, which is called a clinical research coordinator, that's the person that's doing anywhere from 70 to 90% of the trial, working with the physicians. That position in itself, it really branches off into so many different areas. So if you want to become a coordinator and do that for 20 years, great. But if you then say, what's the next step? All of a sudden you can then work your way up from a coordinator to a site manager, region manager, or you can say, I want to go on the pharmaceutical side or the CRO side and become a clinical research associate, or become someone that's in data management or in regulatory compliance or as a statistician. There's like so many different ways it can go. And I've seen individuals that started out as a clinical research coordinator and end up becoming executives in the pharmaceutical world, or end up becoming, traveling clinical research associates. And so it's one of those really interesting industries where the sky is really the limit for where you can go.
I love it. In my 2.5 years as national program director, I've seen a lot of students come through our course and obtain positions after. And a lot of them, just like you said, CJ, go on to that research assistant or CRC position, that clinical research coordinator, where you're working with the participants. But, we've had students who say, I don't really want participant contact. I want to be more behind the scenes. And so just like you said, we do have some folks who go right into regulatory. They're trained and ready to do that. In fact, we've just had some students hired at contract research organizations, some of the biggest companies in clinical research, PRA Health Sciences, IQVIA, these big companies. And then we've also had students hired at sponsor companies where, again, you're not really getting that participant contact, but you're helping to facilitate the trial. So it's really, really exciting. And that's a great question, because you can really take the education and apply it to any one of these realms. And because the field is growing, there's a lot of room to move up in your career.
And Lauren, I'll say this too. If you ask yourself today and you go, I want to be on the patient care side, well, then that coordinator job is going to be a really, really good fit. But for instance, my wife, she didn't want to be as necessarily working hands-on with patients, but she's very data-driven and very detail-oriented. So she landed a job about 3 years ago as a regulatory coordinator. So she actually works behind the scenes, regulatory compliance, making sure everything is running smoothly. And so really, there's so much opportunity, whether you want to work with patients or you want to be kind of on the back end as well.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks, CJ. We have a question here from Louise. She wants to know, do you need to be certified to work in the field? That's an awesome question. So to work in the field, you don't need to be certified, but you're able to obtain certification, but to obtain that certification, you actually need experience working in the field. So there's two bodies that offer those certifications, great organizations, but they require that you have some experience working in the field to be eligible to sit for those examinations. It looks like Sarah just sent us in a question. Oh my gosh, Sarah, you and I have so much in common. Sarah says, I have a psychology degree. Am I able to get into this field? Awesome. Sarah, guess what? I'm a psychology major too. I studied psychology and Latin in my undergrad. When I graduated, I looked around, I said, what can I do with this degree? And I got a little nervous, quite honestly. I wasn't really sure what I was gonna do. And luckily, I was able to, through a lot of hard work, fall into a field of clinical research. And I spent a long time in that first year of my career really kind of bumbling around, looking for mentors, trying to figure out how to do this job. It was kind of scary, but my psychology degree is actually really useful in the field because it's such a field of people. Even if you're not participant facing, if you're not in that coordinator role, you have to interact with so many in the field. So I'd say I use my psychology degree every single day that I've been in the field. You don't need that nursing background, that medical background. You don't have to be a medical doctor to be in this field. Now, we do see a lot of people with medical backgrounds transitioning into this field, and that's great. There's a place for them. That's kind of the beauty of this field. There's a place for everyone. Psychology degree will serve you well, and I think you'll find a home.
Lauren, too.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Hopefully I'm not cutting you off here, but Sarah, I actually have my psychology degree as well. So in the exact same boat as you. And so I get this question a lot. So when I graduated my degree in psychology, I was kind of at a point where, again, what type of role made sense for this job? And it's kind of like, do I want to go to 4 years of school and get my master's, become a psychologist? So there's a lot of people that have an undergrad and maybe they don't want to do 3 or 4 years of school, but they want to do with Fastrack, they can do a month of intensive training and jump into a new career. And so that's the nice part to kind of talk about this program in particular, is there's a lot of people that have kind of this basic education or experience, but they're like, wow, what type of roles are there? And so in research, instead of going to a program for 2, 3, 4 years, you can go through the intensive training to get that experience and kind of foundation. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're gonna take one more question, but I do want to let you guys know there's definitely ways to contact us to get all of your questions answered. I don't want to take up everyone's whole entire afternoon, but we do want to make sure we get to all of your questions. So we have phone number and contact information. I'll get to the special offer in a second too, but I do want to get to Clifton's question. He says, is there a location in Houston, Texas? Well, what is really, really cool about our training, Clifton, is, I'm going to go back to the slide here for a second, is that the bulk of the training takes place right there in your backyard. When you start the training, you are at home and it's self-paced. You're online. I like to think of it as a warm-up. We got to start speaking the same language, and that language is clinical research. So we're going to get you warmed up. Then you'll travel for about a week to one of our classroom locations. This is awesome because you're going to meet so many industry professionals. Our courses aren't taught by, from the ivory tower professors, taught by people who are actually working in the field day in and day out. These are full-time clinical research professionals, CRCs who are patient-facing, who are participant-facing. They're collecting that data. CRAs who travel around and monitor the data. They're there to ensure compliance with FDA regulations, with international guidelines, with the protocol. And so you're going to be taught from folks like that, or from regulatory specialists and project managers. You're going to meet at least a dozen clinical research professionals in the classroom. Those are the 8 days where you would have to travel, but then you go back home. So Clifton, you'd head right back home to Texas, to Houston there, or if you're out there, wherever you're from, you'd head back home. You'd be back online. Again, you can knock out that online work at your leisure on your own hours. Then we put you into a 2-week internship or externship at a clinical trial site. Again, that would be, for you, Clifton, that would be in the Houston area, but it's wherever your hometown is from, wherever you are currently living, because we want you to start networking and building those connections right there in your backyard. So you learn how to do research right there in Houston, for you, Clifton, or wherever you are from. That's where they'd send you home to. So hopefully you were able to answered your question. But what I'd love to do, I know there might be some more questions out there, but we are going to let you go for today. We've really appreciated you joining our webinar. And right here you can see our phone number and our contact information for an email. But we want to say thank you for our webinar today. So if you are interested in our training, you learn more, you have questions, we do offer scholarships. So mention that you joined our webinar today. The code there is webinar500. You'll get a $500 scholarship. Hopefully we will be able to see you in the classroom there. Let me put that back up on the screen there. It's webinar500, and there's our contact information. Again, the phone number, our email. We'd love to answer any questions. As you can tell, I could talk research all day. I think CJ's the same. He could talk about research all day. It's truly our passion, and thank you for allowing us to share that with y'all today. Take care.
Thank you so much.